Good evening, everybody. A good convocation address is something which has a very good start, a quick ending, and nothing in between. I will do my best to keep it short, no matter how long it takes. So, first of all, thank you, sirs. Professor Balal, our Pro-Chancellor. I would also like to thank our Governing Council members, our trustees, Professor Madhu Veeraraghavan, for inviting me to TAPMI. This is just astounding. Many years ago, I used to come here as a recruiter. And every time I used to come to TAPMI, I always used to say, there's something special about this place. The people who do really well at Deloitte are people from TAPMI. And I used to wonder, what is the magic sauce that is served out here that makes them so special and they do so well with us? So there are many things, so I'll relate a few. I'm going to do this in three parts. I'm going to start with what happened to me yesterday. I will also speak about three things. I'll speak about leadership. I'll speak about what companies really look for in people who are young professionals. And I want to close by saying, what should you be doing to really do well in your own careers? So yesterday when I came to campus, the first thing that they did was, they took me to a place and said, you got to plant a sapling. Now that to me was astounding because I'm a nature lover, and as soon as I came in, I planted something, and my thoughts went out to a young boy who once asked his grandfather, and this was in some remote place in Assam. He asked his grandfather, "Grandpa, tell me, why is it that there are no animals around this place? There are no trees." So the grandfather says, "Son, there are no trees, there is no water, and that's why." So this young man took it upon himself to plant a tree every day. Not only did he do that, he started to water them. And mind you, this campus is all of, let's say, 44 acres or 50 acres. He built out a forest of 1,500 acres of land. And this gentleman, yes, you can put your hands together. This gentleman's name is Payang Yadav, and Payang Yadav is Padma Shri Payang Yadav. I relate to it a lot because when somebody comes onto campus, your distinguished professors, people who are on the dais, all that they do is they plant the seed of a thought that grows in your mind. And all of them are Payang Yadavs because they've been doing this not for just one batch, but they do it batch over batch over batch. Could you be a little louder for this, please? Thank you. So I'm going to tell you another story. Hey, by the way, how many of you love stories? Shameless people. Okay, so this is a story of an old lady, and this old lady used to be had only one leg. They lived in a very modest house, and they had just one room for privacy curtains. They used to have a jute bag, and they used to sew a few of them. That was the privacy curtain out there. Of course, the bathroom was kind of common for everybody. And this old lady had a knack. She used to recount a lot of stories. And this was where? In the living room. What was the living room? The platform. So this is outside the house. There was a platform. They call it the sidewalk these days. And she used to be sitting there, and she used to have a bowl of a little bit of rice, a little bit of curd, lots of water, and all her grandchildren used to be around it. And she used to keep feeding these people and telling stories because that's the old way of sharing experiences. And one day what happened was, as she was recounting the story, one of the grandchildren turned the other side. And when that happened, the old lady got very upset. She says, "What is it? I'm telling you something and you're not listening to me." And the young boy says, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. There was a car that went past." "What about that car?" I said, "Grandma, can I ever sit in a car?" So this grandmother says, "Son, you'll not only sit in a car, but if you have to sit in the car, sit in the front seat. And you should be the owner of the car. And if you're sitting behind, then the driver must be your driver, the car must be yours." Now she's telling somebody who hardly has 2 meals a day. Well, every time I sit in my car and I come to work, I start to think of this old lady who had just but one leg, recounting stories, because I remember what she says. "Grandma, can I ever sit in a car?" And the grandmother says, "You can if you think you can. You just got to dream it. And you got to work very hard for it." I have not forgotten. As I sit in my car, I remember what the grandmother used to say, because the grandmother was my grandmother. And I feel very privileged because of what she told me and what I took to heart. So, this is a little bit about some experiences at work. I remember as soon as I graduated, one of the first things that I had to do was, I didn't have to be in any fancy cities and all that. They put me in some remote place in Bihar. It was then Bihar, it is now Jharkhand. I have a reputation, if I'm in any place for more than 8 years, the state splits. I was in Bihar for 8 years, the state split. I was in Hyderabad for 8 years, the state split. My friends in Bombay now tell me, "You better go back to Hyderabad." Anyways, when I was there, I remember the first job that I had was that of an administrative officer. Now what does this guy have to do? He'll have to look after 4 cars. In an explosives factory, looking after 4 cars, a lot of trucks, and making sure that the nearest place, which was about some 120 kilometers away, you had vehicles that can service that place. 4 cars, most of them will be in the garage. So one day somebody came up to me and said, "Nathan, we need a car." And looked at him and said, "I don't have a car because all of them are in the garage." Now you have to beg the garage mechanic to make sure that the cars are up to speed. In those days, no Uber, no Ola, nothing. So anyway, I went up, told the mechanic said, "Nahi banega, there's no way that you can do it." I went back and told the man, "Sorry, no cars available." He went and complained to the general manager. General manager was like the biggest guy in that place. He called me up, and without even checking with what was happening, he started to shout at me. And I was really feeling low because I was but a management trainee, and coming in early into these kinds of jobs where you really start to wonder what you can do about it when you have no control over cars. And suddenly the door opened and there was a man who came running and stood in front of me. He looked at the general manager and he said, "Sir, I am accountable. This boy may be responsible, but I am accountable." And he looked at me and says, "Nathan, you may go." The man, I will never forget, was my boss, Captain Nautiyal. I always remember him because in anything that you do, my friends, never put any of your colleagues under the bus. Always take responsibility. That's the first lesson that I learned as a management trainee. The second one happened much later, very much later in my own career. One time what happened was we were on these conference calls. And this conference call was about somebody who went to the US. And when you go to the US, you're working on something. Something happened to this boy, and he contracted something which was called brain fever. I have no name for that, sir. Professor Balal, I'm sure there must be some medical name for it. But this case was beyond repair. And they had pretty much told him that he has to get into hospice, which means that they're going to allow this man to just pass away. This call was about checking to see whether they should bring the person back to India. And at that point, This was a call for about an hour. You had the CFO, the CEO, you had every person who is responsible as a member of the executive on that call. The call was to check whether they should bring the person to India, and also what was also going to be checking to see if they can bring the person in an air ambulance. An air ambulance means you cannot travel for more than 5-7 hours at a stretch. So they'll have to go to various cities and airports along the way. The person may not even survive the journey. But there was one woman who always said, India is a better place for such cases. You must bring the person here, somehow do something. The cost was prohibitive. It was going to cost us, almost like $500,000. It's a lot of money. But more importantly, forget the money. There was no chance that the person can even survive the journey. The call was almost 55 minutes through. Everybody had decided that this is going to be over, done, dusted. They're going to allow this person to just pass away in peace. Then there was one solitary voice that got up and said, hey, ladies and gentlemen, this person, if he had remained in India, would be alive. This person went all the way to the US and contracted this in the US. I believe that as a firm, we have a responsibility for this life. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important to bring the soldier home, because in India, we have much better facilities to take care of such ailments. There was a deathly silence. Then after which, I have no idea what happened. The CEO spoke up and he says, yes, this person is right. Let's bring the soldier home. Let's send the soldier home. Well, fast forward, many things happened. The person came to India, went into a hospital, and a few months later, I went to meet Alok. Alok was very much alive. His wife was very, very pleased. I was very happy to meet Alok, because that voice that spoke that day on that call is speaking to you today. Never forget, your voice is not a small voice. All of you, regardless of where you are in your career, you have a voice. You can really influence people who are around you. Never forget that. It's only the art of persuasion. How can you say things in a way that gets people to believe? And I remember, when you say things like, let's bring the soldier home, it kind of tugs at the heart. So that's the other one that I learned, that it is important to speak up when you really have to speak up. The third one is show up. Years ago, and I know that we have your director out here, Madhu, he keeps running every day. I used to be a runner also, and it was one of those races where you have to run some 14 kilometers, but this was through the hills and dales. And it has always been won by a gentleman called Lakra, Praveen Lakra. And Lakra had won it. He was an Adivasi, and he was very well built, and he used to win it every year. And I was the new kid on the block, and I decided I'm going to run this race. I don't care whether we win it or not. I ran the race. I kept running and running and running. At one point in time, I gave up because Lakra was almost like half a kilometer ahead. Suddenly, there was on a scooter somebody who came, and he was by my side. He looked at me and he said, hey, you can do it. You must do it. Run, run, run. And of course, he used some very choice words. I can't say those words right now. But I got very, I got really motivated. I said, I must run this race. If not anything, it must be for this gentleman. I'll never forget Daljit Singh. Daljit Singh was the person who helped me get past the line, and I really did well. I mean, I stood first, but that's not the point. Daljit taught me how to show up. It does not matter where you are. It is important to show up. The last one of this is someone that I really, really love. So here is a gentleman who gives me a call one lazy Sunday afternoon, and he says, boss, I'm again having to go to Hawaii. So I said, what's wrong with Hawaii? You're again going to Hawaii. What's the big deal? You can go to Hawaii. So he says, no boss, you don't get it. I've been going to Hawaii for the last 4 years. And why is it that you go to Hawaii? He says, look, this company awards the top 1 percentile of people around the world to come to Hawaii for a conference. I'm now bored stiff. So I said, well, in that case, don't go. He said, but I have to go. I said, go. The name of this gentleman is Mahidhar Reddy. I will never forget Mahi. And the story goes like this. One day, when I was at work, and I was new to this organization, at about 10 o'clock at night, all offices had closed. I mean, my light was on. I was trying to understand what this firm was about. I looked in the far corner, and this was in the good old days where you had to be, you had to go out and tell the watchman, now you can lock this place. I saw that there was some singing which was going on. There was a guy who was very happy. He was singing and he was saying, he was speaking all to himself. I went up, I said, hey, you seem to be very happy. He said, yes, I'm very, very happy, sir. I said, what are you doing? He said, printing slips of payroll. So he was printing payroll slips. So I said, you're a payroll slip guy? He said, yes, sir. I'm a payroll. I'm a guy who prints payroll. So I said, but why are you so happy about it? He says, sir, you don't understand my job. I put 1 extra zero, somebody is hugely happy. I take away 1 zero, somebody is really very unhappy. So you don't underestimate the value of my job. So I like this guy. So I said, hey, Mahi, can you come to my office tomorrow? Because it's pretty late at night. Morning, I went to work. 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from a sales manager who was in Bombay, and he says, Nathan, I have a problem. I need a regional sales manager, and I need this person by tomorrow. And I need him to be the best. So I told him, I said, Sanjay, I have the right guy for you. He's an outstanding chap. You must take him. So he said, okay. Fast forward, knock, knock. Mahidhar comes into the room. I looked at Mahi. I said, Mahi, would you be wanting to take a job in Bombay? She said, why not? As what? I said, as the regional human resources head. So he said, sir, do you realize I'm a payroll clerk? And this is like several layers above. So he said, doesn't matter. Will you do that job? Forget the role. He said, I can do it. Then I asked him, just as he was heading to the door, I asked him, hey, listen, tell me a little bit about your educational qualification, just so somebody asks me. He said, sir, I did my BCom from Pachepas. Now, Pachepas in those good old days in Chennai used to be a college of certain repute. And then I asked him, what did you do after this? He said, I did MBA. And then I said, where did you do your MBA? He said, I went to VGP School of Management. I said, I've never heard of this. So he said, sir, they closed down shop after I entered that school. Anyways, I said, do you know Hindi? He said, Thora, Thora. And my heart sank. I said, this is a place which needs Hindi. So anyways, he went over and he was easily one of the most respected HR professionals ever. He retired, he kind of quit on Hewlett-Packard as a director of human resources, and he was one of their youngest human resources professionals. I say this with a lot of pride because if there are opportunities that stare at you, grab them with both hands. Don't let that go. That is going to be absolutely crucial for you. I'm now going to go forward and speak to you about what organizations really look for in professionals. In young professionals, what do organizations look for? There are only 3 things. You will not forget them. I promise you. There are only 3 things. They look for, how do you think? How do you think? I mean, what's your learnability? Are you able to bring something new to the table that others do not know? Do you have conceptual ability? Are you able to look at the broader picture? You may not today, but you will. But organizations look for that. And are you really fast? Can you think? Are you agile? They look for that. They also look for, what can you do? think, do. On the doing part, do you have passion? It doesn't matter what you do, but do you really have passion? Very much like Maida Reddy, do you really have the passion? If you have the passion, you will really do very well. Are you also reliable? And Professor Madhu and I were speaking, and we talked about how focus is very important for us today. Anything that you do, be hugely, hugely focused. That will take you really far. The last one is who you are. Think, do. 3, who you are. Who you are is a little bit about, do you have the right bent of mind? Are you a positive guy? Are you a person who is extremely confident? Do people really love you? There were some people who came up, and as soon as they walked up, there were a lot of applause. Obviously, there are people who are well liked. And I remember a story of a young man who went to his village after almost 15 years. And then, on the way, he found an old person sitting on the road. And he went up and he was very curious. He said, "Old man, tell me, I'm going to that village yonder. How is the village today? How is the village today? I'm so anxious to know about how my village is today." So he says, "How was the village when you left?" So the young man said, "It was astounding. There were a lot of children playing out on the roads. There were housewives who went to each other's places. The men, they sat up and they worked till very late in the evening. And in the evening, they all met at the small temple. They had bhajans, and it was such a lively place." And the old man looked at this person and said, "Son, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed." Well, after a couple of days, there was another young man, perhaps from the same place, from the same institute, who went to that village. And then he saw that old man and he said, "Old man, tell me, I'm going to that village. How is the village today?" The old man asked him, "How was it when you left that village?" He said, "Old man, it was a terrible place. There were children who could never be contained in their houses. They were always out on the street. The mothers, they could never get hold of them. By the way, they were also out in each other's houses. And the men folk, they always met, they kept singing. I mean, they had no respect for anybody around in the village. Old man, how is it today?" And the old man said, "Son, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed." Perhaps part of who we are is what is important. So think, do, and who you are. Okay, what are the 3 things that you will ask when you join an organization? First, ask for a coach. When you go to an organization, you must say, and by the way, you cannot go right up and say, "Hey, listen, can you be my coach?" There are ways of doing it. But find out people who can help you. I remember I wanted to be a sprinter. So Madhu, this is for you. I wanted to be a sprinter, and I went up to the ground and I told this gentleman who was a coach out there, the head coach, and I said, "I want to be a sprinter." He says, "Okay, just run and show me what you can do." And then I did my 100 meters. I went up to him, I said, "What do you think?" He says, "You can't do it." I was crestfallen. I went home and I was weeping. And my mother came up and she said, "What happened to you?" I said, "Mama, what do I do? This coach has refused me. And he says, I cannot run 100 meters. So she was a wise coach. So she looked at me and said, "Ask the coach what you're good at." So next day I went up and says, "Coach, tell me, what could I be good at?" So coach again says, "Okay, run 400 meters and tell me." And so I ran around the ground about some 5 times, which was almost 2 kilometers. He looked at me and he says, "You will make a good long distance runner." I was feeling very happy because since that day, translated, into the way I was thinking was, find out what is your edge. What are you really good at? Just because some boss of yours tells you that you're not good at this does not mean you got to give up in your life. You could be good in something, and that may be of humongous value to your organization. Find out what your strengths are. 2, find out if there are people who will help you and guide you. In every organization, there'll always be somebody who will guide you. You will not even know who that savior is. You'll never know who that savior is. So many, many years ago, all the gods decided to have a meeting. And when gods have their meeting, they'll bring their own vehicles. So Ganesha came in his Mushika. We had Kartikeya who came in his peacock. We had Lord Indra, and Lord Indra came in his elephant Airavat. We had Shiva who came in his Nandi, and so on and so forth. And we had Vishnu who had his Garuda. The person who was the late Latif was Lord Yama. And Lord Yama, when he came in, he came on his bullock. And as he looked around, he found a bird, and that bird was very happy and she was chirping. And Lord Yama looked at the bird and frowned. Now this was noticed by Garuda. As soon as this meeting started, Garuda was very, very confident that something is going to happen to the bird, caught hold of the bird and said, I'm going to take you to a place where nobody can reach you. So this is across seven rivers, 7 oceans, 7 seas, and 7 mountains. They found a place, and this was a hermit. He had a kamandala, and he said, you be in this kamandala, which is really a receptacle for water, and you be over here. I'll come and pick you up after all this meeting is over. Meeting got over. Yama came out. He looked. The bird was not there. He smiled. He walked away. And now Garuda, he went and made sure that that his boss was in his house, and then he took off to find where that bird was. He got hold of the bird, and then he brought the bird. The bird was still alive, and then he went and told his master, Lord Vishnu. He said, I'm very, very happy because I was able to save this bird. And Lord Vishnu just smiled. This time Garuda looked at him and said, why are you smiling? And he says, listen, the kamandala that you put this bird in had a black cobra. The cobra would have really made sure that this bird died. But I knew that I had to save the bird because you took off and I saw that. And I made sure that the cobra did not harm the bird. In many of our own careers, you will find such Garudas. Make sure that you are able to find out who these people are, because they are the people who will keep you on track. In my long career of over 30 years, there have been many, many Garudas, because we all have our own failings, but there are always people who will be up there to find and protect you. The last part of what I want to say to you is, how do we really do well in our own careers? First, a little bit about leadership. 2, how do you make sure that you look at the ones that companies look for? Companies look for only 3 things: what you think, what you do, and who you are. How do you make sure that you can really cement your careers and do a good job? Number 1, make sure that you have your ethics and integrity above all. If you're going to be working for an organization which really turns a Nelson's eye to ethics and integrity, you should not belong to such an organization. It's better that you fire the organization, because that's a much better way for you to really grow up in your own career. Second one I'll say is, do simple things exceedingly well. Simple things exceedingly well. I was management trainee years ago, worked in a British company, and in the British company they were very, very particular about the way you dress. I never even polished my shoes. My boss used to look at my shoes, he never used to say anything. One day it rained. When it rained, my dirty shoes got cleaned. When my shoes got cleaned, and when I went up to work, my boss looked at my shoes, And he said, Nathan, your shoes are shining. Now, how do I tell him that I had nothing to do with it? It is all the rains. But then, the next day, as I went to work, what's the first thing that I did? Polish my shoes. Because that's most important. Do simple things exceedingly well. There are a lot of good things which happen around you. Make sure that you acknowledge them. There are, for all the people who have medals, there are all the people who have been acknowledged, pat them on the back. You might start to think, oh boy, I should have received one. Don't worry. This is a very long race. You will really get all the medals and all the accolades in your life. But make sure that you go and find something right in somebody once a day. That's something which will really help you in your own career. Make your boss look good. Don't find faults with your boss. Don't talk ill about your boss behind his back. It's a small word. It all gets around. Find good, he's not your boss for nothing. Find yourself a very good compass. Find out your true north. Find out where you're going. You're working very, very hard. But make sure that you're working in the right quarter, the place that will really get you up there. After 30 years, I look at all my classmates and where they are today. The people who are at the top of the heap and people who are at the bottom of the pile make no difference, because all of them are doing very well. So, by the way, I should not be telling this to people who are coming in for induction, because then they will all say, what is the big deal? All I have to do is clear the exams. But this is a long race. Make sure that you enjoy what you do. If you're running, keep running. In closure, all I'll say is, there was once a king. And the king looked at the Zen master and said, hey, Zen master, do you think that my prince is ready to take over my position? So the Zen master looked up at the prince and says, okay, prince, go into the forest, spend 6 months, and come back and tell me what you heard. So in those days, nobody complained. He picked up his bag, a little bit of clothes here and there, went off into the forest. After 6 months, there was a person with disheveled hair. He walked into the darbar, went right up to the Zen master and says, Zen master, I am here, your prince, and I've come back after 6 months. Ask what questions you have. Zen master says, son, what have you heard? He said, well, I heard the sound of the rains, I heard the sound of the river, I heard the sound of people as they walked by, I heard the sound of the elephants, a lot of roaring of lions and tigers and of birds and chirping. And master, what else would you hear in a forest? This is what I heard. The Zen master looks up at the kid and says, son, go back into the forest, spend another 6 months, and come back and tell me what you heard. This time the Queen Mother was very upset. The king was also very concerned. Why is the Zen master doing all this? But then they all decided that maybe it's the right thing for the prince to do. So they went back into the forest. This time the prince spent another 6 months. And as soon as he came into the darbar after 6 months, it was very noticeable that there was a man with matted hair. He walked with measured steps, walked right up to the Zen master, gave him a very deep bow, and he looked up at him and he says, it is I, your disciple, Zen master. I went to the forest 6 months ago, as you may remember. Pray, what can I do for you? Zen master says, yes, you must be our prince. So tell me, what did you hear? So the Zen master says, well, master, I heard the sound of fragrance as they wafted through the air. I heard the sound of the dewdrops as they evaporated in the morning. I heard the sound of the rays of the sun as they struck Mother Earth. I heard the sound of the rainbows as they painted a pretty picture in the sky. I heard the sound of the dreams of people as they walked past. Master, I heard the sound of the shadows of the setting sun. Master, this is what I heard. And as soon as he said this, the Zen master got up, took a deep bow, went up to the king and told the king, Sir, our prince is now ready to be the new king. Two years ago, many of you came into TAPMI. You spent 6 months, make it 1 year, and then you went back, and then you came in. And today, when you're all sitting out here receiving your graduate diplomas, you're all the princes and princess who are all ready to take on the mantle of the king or the queen. Many of you right now are ready to take on the great jobs. All I want to say as I end this evening of what little I had to share is, if you are from TAPMI, know that you will do exceedingly well. If you are from TAPMI, you will do exceedingly well. Wish you all the very best. Wish you all the very best. And sincerely so. Thank you very much.